Welcome back, my friends. I'm Cole Haddon, and this is 5AM StoryTalk. Today is going to be a shortish episode focused almost entirely on some readers' questions about feature screenplay templates, the ones that are mass marketed in screenwriting guides, and how to develop your own approach to narrative, which I would argue is the best way to do it so you don't end up writing scripts that feel or even read like knockoffs. Now, don't get me wrong, knockoffs sell. Hacks get a lot of work, but original voices, they sell a lot more. First, though, I want to let you know that I used to identify these irregular plogs as 5AM RealTalk. Honestly, that was a stupid idea in the first place, in hindsight. Having never produced a podcast before, so much of this thing is a work in progress. In this case, RealTalk got confused with the actual title of this podcast, and it's made creating promotional art for episodes even more confusing. I've also come to realize these plogs, these more intimate reflections about my life as an artist, rather than having guests on or storytelling and culture audio essays, are quite popular. They're not the quirky addendum to this podcast I thought they'd be, but something many of you seem to be taking a lot from when I look at download numbers. I'm shocked by this, probably because I'm still always shocked anybody cares about anything I have to say. So, as of today, I'm relabeling 5AM StoryTalk's plog as The Brew, brewing something up, given how I largely use this space to dig into what goes into creating, or at least trying to create, something meaningful in the 21st century. It's a place to discuss in coffee-infused semi-real time what's happening in the arts and my own real life, as well as tackle other things, like your questions, which is what I'll be doing today. The Brew is probably most ideally experienced at Substack, where you'll find them presented as an audio podcast, video, and readable text with valuable links and quite often artwork. There's nowhere else where the 5AM StoryTalk experience will be as complete as it is there, and the vast majority of the content is bonus free. Subscribe at the link in the show notes if you haven't already. Now, as for the subject of today's quick chat, which, as I said up front, is going to be quick because I'm working on a new spec script I need to prioritize right now, I want to touch on a subject I get a lot of questions about from story talkers. I just got another email about it, in fact, and I'm talking about structure here, about screenplay templates, about the idea of some sort of beat sheet that is the holy grail of script hacks. Now, the opening lyrics of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah comes to mind here. The idea that there's some secret chord to please the Lord, or in the context of this conversation, audiences. A lot of screenwriting gurus with very successful screenwriting guides like Save the Cat will tell you there is. But the problem arises when you give something a name, right? When you confuse it for a rule, when you provide a structure that amounts to a color by numbers plot that resembles everyone else's. You can't create something original, something great, with a screenwriter's cheat code. Instead, you produce knockoffs, glorified copies, predictable and boring, and ultimately sterile. It's the same problem with relying on AI to write. And hopefully you can hear the quotation marks around that word, writing with AI. Real screenwriting requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of study before you get remotely good at it. So, if you can't bypass this process, and screenwriting templates printed inside books and mass marketed online can actually undermine originality, how does one learn traditional screenplay structure in a way that is both actionable for those who are, by inclination or necessity, what I call structuralists, what the British call pantsers, to pant something, those who prefer to make it up as they go along, write from a more emotional, psychological, unpredictable perspective? Well, the answer is much simpler than you might think. It's certainly not as easy as buying a how-to guide and printing out its template and, filling in all those spaces. And it's nowhere near as expensive as getting an MFA in screenwriting. No, all it requires is a stack of legal pads, a packet of pens, and a remote control. Here's how it works. You plant your ass in front of your TV screen, you put on the greatest films ever made, and you take what you glean from those screenwriting guides and break down other people's films instead, beat by beat. Identify those major narrative signposts along the way. The inciting incident, for example, or whatever you want to call it, the thing that sets your protagonist in motion some way or another. Others being the first act turn, the all-important midpoint, the low point, and so on. Where do they come along in the film? Pause as you watch, too, recording time codes for later reference. How often are you surprised by how these films defy the mass-marketed screenwriting templates? A lot more than you'd expect, by the way. Now, interrogate individual scenes. Go back, rewatch them over and over. How does each move the story forward? How did the protagonists in each scene do that? How do the stakes keep changing or escalating? Where are the plot reversals? How often do these come along, and how often does the protagonist gain or lose ground because of them? Now, trust me, this is a lot more fun than it sounds. I just did it again myself with Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, which is probably, I think, the third time doing it with this film. It's one of the most structurally perfect Hollywood films of the 21st century, and one of the best structured action films of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And yet, it constantly defies screenwriting templates beyond the major signposts that have been present in storytelling for centuries, if not millennia. Another great film to do this, whether you're writing an action film or a drama or a rom-com, is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Ask yourself how each scene moves character and plot forward, complicates Indiana Jones's mission, and maybe, most importantly, compels the viewer to keep watching. As you dissect its scenes and then 3 acts, you begin to see the decisions that explain why the film is so structurally and emotionally perfect. 3 more great places for aspiring screenwriters to start to really get a sense of how basic structure works for the screen without reducing the process to filling in the blanks are my favorite film of all time, Lawrence of Arabia, which is a masterclass in character is plot and plot is character, and both illuminate the theme. It predates a lot of contemporary structure codifications, so this is a great way to explore how things have changed for better or worse. Then there's Notting Hill, another one of my favorite films, which has a script that even legendary screenwriter William Goldman adored. It endlessly subverts the rom-com genre, making it extra worth studying. Every scene has a kind of aching, narrative purpose and surprises in some way or another, always from a character perspective. I wrote an essay on a key scene from the film a couple of years ago, which I'll drop in the episode notes for you. I really think it's worth checking out if you're a screenwriter. The other film is Ocean's 11, which is so conscious of structure that it weaponizes it as a part of the con the filmmakers play on the audience. I don't mean the characters here, the filmmakers. You're led to believe one thing throughout the whole film, a sort of cinematic sleight of hand that depends on how obvious its structure appears. Also, the filmmakers can pull off a twist as great as the film's central heist. The reason why you're manually breaking these films, any films down beat by beat, is to internalize how they did it, and then ask yourself why those decisions worked so well. It's so you stop filling in the blanks in someone else's idea of a story, so you stop simulating other people's films and begin to originate your own. It's also to begin to understand at an unconscious level what's going wrong in your own script before it becomes a glaring problem. There are other ways to become a great screenwriter and to write great scripts. There are always exceptions, and I don't want you to think I'd suggest otherwise about anything I say here. But here's the advantage to what I'm suggesting. If you do it this way, you learn how to write scripts in your own way, through analysis and deconstruction. And then, as you work yourself, application. You develop the intuition that both helps you write better scripts from the get-go, but also identify the problems that develop along the way. If you do it the screenwriting guide way instead, if you just crack open one of those books and think, yeah, I have a cool idea, I'm just going to go for it, you will take so much longer to reach the finish line. You're going to mostly learn through trial and error while ripping off other people's hard work, script after script, until one day, finally, you turn out something truly your own. Along the way, you won't even be able to explain the mistakes you're making for the longest time. You'll just be greeted by rejection until, hopefully, you're not. You'll get there. All that trial and error will be incredibly helpful. It will be. But in most cases, I find that journey is so lengthy and filled with failure that most aspiring screenwriters give up. I mean, think about it this way. If you wanted to take a painting on the canvas, You wouldn't watch a YouTube video and just give it a go yourself. The results would be terrible and quickly discouraging. Also expensive. All that paint and the canvases, your time has value too, especially in a world where you might be working 2 or 3 jobs trying to chase this screenwriting dream. The more efficient, not to mention more edifying process would be to start small, to learn how artists you admired worked, to understand the fundamentals you'll not only have to employ, but possibly even defy to create something truly original. Which brings me to this week's artist quote. As you know, I like to share these as a way for us to reflect on our own work. This one comes from Pablo Picasso, who famously said, "Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist." Yes, he said rules, but I don't think he meant the hard rules, rather the accepted rules, which is all rules ever are, by the way, and very often erroneously. In this regard, screenwriting guides do have some use. They provide you language to help you articulate aspects of your own creative journey, but also to communicate with those who have an inferior understanding of your craft. Screenwriting guides are also worth bearing in mind because art is, in some way or another, a conversation with all the art that has preceded it. It is so often a response to it, as I said, of Notting Hill and Ocean's 11. We use the word subvert a lot in this regard, as I have in this ep already. As a storyteller, you cannot subvert ideas you don't fully understand, both why they're so ubiquitous and why they're so tenacious. This is a third reason why I think my approach to developing your own screenplay template is so helpful. Okay, that's it for this week. If you have any questions about what we've discussed, find me in the comments of this episode at Substack, where I hope you're a subscriber. You can ask other questions too, which I might answer on a future edition of The Brew. I look forward to the next episode. In fact, I think I'm going to be talking about this new script I'm working on, sort of the process I went through to get to the place where I could finally start it. Lastly, be sure to check out this week's bonus ep from 5AM StoryTalk, available now. I'm going to be talking about how to fix your shitty exposition in your screenplays. You'll find it especially helpful if your scripts involve any kind of world building. I'll see you around, Story Talkers.